The pressure is closing in on Keir Starmer. A political earthquake has erupted, shaking the foundations of the Labour Party and placing his leadership in jeopardy. Explosive allegations have surfaced, accusations so damning they could force Starmer into the one position he has desperately sought to avoid: resignation. But what exactly has been uncovered? What secrets have been exposed live on national television, sending his future into chaos? For months, whispers of discontent have echoed through Westminster. Starmer's leadership has faced growing scrutiny, with fractures appearing within his own ranks. But now, a full-blown political firestorm has ignited, threatening to consume everything in its path. It all began with a shocking revelation, aired live, leaving Starmer stunned and the Labour Party scrambling to contain the fallout. At first, it seemed like another political controversy, something Starmer could dismiss with a carefully crafted statement. But this time was different. These weren't minor infractions or political missteps. They were grave accusations that could unravel everything he has built. Reports suggest that confidential documents, private discussions, and clandestine backroom deals have come to light, painting a picture of deception, power struggles, and broken promises. One of the most damaging allegations centers on Starmer's handling of party finances. Sources claim that funds meant for grassroots campaigns and struggling constituencies were redirected for personal political gain. If true, this could shatter Labour's credibility, directly contradicting its message of fairness and transparency. But the controversy doesn't stop there. Allegations have also emerged regarding Starmer's role in suppressing dissent, silencing MPs and officials who dared to question his authority. The real bombshell came with a leaked report, aired on national television, exposing alleged secret dealings with key figures outside the party. The documents suggest that alliances were forged, promises were made, and concessions were granted, all behind closed doors. The revelation sent shockwaves through the political landscape, with even Starmer's closest allies reconsidering their support. The backlash was swift. Social media exploded with demands for answers, and calls for his resignation grew louder by the hour. As Starmer struggles to contain the damage, one question looms large: can he survive this scandal, or is this the beginning of the end? The Labour Party now stands at a crossroads, and the decisions made in the coming days could shape its future for years to come. This is no ordinary political crisis. This is an all-out battle for the soul of the Labour Party, and Starmer is at the centre of it. As the shocking revelations rippled through Westminster, Starmer's grip on the Labour Party began to slip. Within hours, the party descended into chaos, with high-profile figures scrambling to either defend or distance themselves from their embattled leader. The once carefully maintained illusion of unity was shattered, exposing deep divisions that had simmered beneath the surface for months. Senior party members who had remained loyal despite mounting concerns now faced a difficult choice: stand by a leader whose credibility was collapsing or prepare for an inevitable battle over the party's future. What had once been whispers of discontent behind closed doors erupted into outright defiance. MPs and officials openly questioned whether Starmer could weather the storm, but the real danger wasn't just from within his own party. The public backlash was even more ferocious. Across social media, outrage was immediate and relentless. The hashtag Starmer Resign began trending within minutes of the revelations going public. Labour supporters and critics alike demanded accountability. Starmer had built his leadership on promises of integrity, transparency, and a break from the controversies that plagued Labour in the past. But now, those very promises were being used against him. The people who had once trusted him to restore the party's credibility now felt betrayed. The scandal provided the Conservative Party with the perfect weapon. Tory MPs wasted no time in launching scathing attacks, calling Starmer unfit to govern and a hypocrite who preached honesty while operating in the shadows. The pressure mounted, and Starmer knew he had to respond. But every move he made seemed to make things worse. His initial attempt at damage control, a carefully worded statement dismissing the allegations as politically motivated, fell flat. The public had heard these denials before from leaders who eventually fell when the truth was exposed. What made matters worse was the eerie silence from some of Labour's most influential figures. MPs who would normally rush to defend their leader were now conspicuously absent from the conversation. The lack of vocal support signaled one thing: the party was bracing for a leadership crisis. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings were reportedly held as key Labour officials debated the next steps. Would they rally behind Starmer in a desperate attempt to salvage his leadership, or was it time to consider a new leader before the damage became irreversible? As uncertainty loomed, another devastating blow struck. An anonymous insider, someone reportedly from within Starmer's inner circle, came forward with even more damning claims. In an exclusive interview, the whistleblower revealed that Starmer had been warned months ago about potential leaks regarding internal dealings but had arrogantly dismissed the concerns, believing his position was too strong to be shaken. If true, this revelation confirmed what many had suspected. Starmer's downfall wasn't merely the result of political enemies exploiting a scandal, but his own refusal to acknowledge growing dissent within his ranks. The arrogance of a leader who believed himself untouchable was now coming back to haunt him, and the very foundation of his leadership was crumbling beneath him. But the nightmare was far from over. As the political storm raged on, new reports surfaced that some of Labour's major donors were reconsidering their financial support. The scandal had cast a shadow of doubt over the party's ability to remain stable under Starmer's leadership, and without financial backing, Labour's campaign for the next election could be in jeopardy. The pressure on Starmer was reaching a boiling point. MPs demanded answers, the public called for his resignation, and now, the possibility of losing crucial financial support loomed large. It was no longer just a question of whether Starmer could repair his image, it was a question of whether the Labour Party itself could survive the damage. This was no longer just about leaked documents or secret deals. It had escalated into a full-blown leadership crisis that threatened to shatter everything. As Labour's internal war erupted into full view, one thing became clear: Starmer was no longer in control of his own destiny. The calls for his resignation grew louder. The walls were closing in, and the battle for Labour's future had begun. But was this truly the end for Keir Starmer, or did he have one final trick up his sleeve to fight back against the forces trying to bring him down? As the crisis deepened, the fractures within the Labour Party widened into full-blown fault lines. Starmer had spent years cultivating an image of control, a leader who could bring order to Labour's internal chaos and present a united front. But that illusion was now shattered. What had started as whispers among backbench MPs had escalated into outright defiance. One by one, figures who had once stood by his side began to distance themselves. Their carefully worded statements signaled a shift that was impossible to ignore. Some still attempted to maintain neutrality, expressing vague concerns about the serious allegations and the need for transparency. Others, those with leadership ambitions of their own, began sharpening their knives, ready to strike at the opportune moment. And then, the first major blow came from within Starmer's own ranks. A senior figure, once considered a close ally, released a carefully calculated statement that sent shockwaves through the party. Labour is at a crossroads, they said. We must uphold the values we have promised the British people: honesty, accountability, and leadership they can trust. The words were diplomatic, but the meaning was clear. Starmer's leadership was now in question, even among those at the highest levels of the party. The betrayal had begun. Behind the scenes, internal discussions took a darker turn. Reports surfaced that key figures within Labour were already strategizing for a post-Starmer era, gauging support for potential leadership contenders. The names being whispered in political circles were not surprising: figures who had long harbored ambitions but had remained patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment had arrived. The media wasted no time fueling the speculation, pressing Labour MPs to declare where they stood. Some dodged the questions, hoping to avoid taking sides too soon, while others, emboldened by the growing chaos, openly called for Starmer to consider his position, a thinly veiled demand for his resignation. The most damning betrayal came from those Starmer had relied on the most, his inner circle. The very people who had helped craft his public image, advised him on political strategy, and been in the room for every major decision of his leadership were now turning against him. One senior aide, speaking on condition of anonymity, delivered a brutal assessment. He knew this was coming, they revealed. We warned him, we told him there were vulnerabilities, that there were risks. But he ignored it. He thought he was untouchable. The revelation painted a devastating picture of a leader who had grown complacent, dismissing the warnings of those closest to him, believing his position was unshakable. But now, as the walls closed in, those same allies were abandoning ship, unwilling to go down with him. The betrayals weren't just political, they were personal. Another senior Labour figure, once one of Starmer's staunchest defenders, was now reportedly in private discussions about the future direction of the party with some of Labour's biggest donors. The message was clear: Starmer was no longer seen as an asset but a liability. The financial backers who had once supported him, who had poured millions into Labour's campaign efforts, were beginning to hedge their bets. If the scandal worsened, if Starmer's approval ratings continued to plummet, they would not hesitate to shift their support elsewhere. Money was the lifeblood of political campaigns, and without it, Starmer's ability to mount a defense would weaken even further. Meanwhile, the pressure from outside forces was only intensifying. Conservative MPs, sensing blood in the water, went on the offensive, launching relentless attacks in Parliament and across the media. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak wasted no time capitalising on Labour's internal turmoil, using every opportunity to paint the party as divided, weak, and unfit to govern. Tory ministers lined up to deliver scathing critiques, with one megapixel declaring, "Labour promised the British people a new era of politics, but all they've delivered is scandal, cover-ups, and infighting. How can they be trusted to run the country when they can't even govern themselves?" It was a devastating line of attack, one that resonated with a disillusioned public. Then came the polls. The first major survey conducted after the scandal delivered a brutal reality check for Labour. The party, which had been comfortably ahead just weeks before, saw a dramatic drop in public support. Worse still, Starmer's personal approval ratings had taken a nosedive. A growing percentage of voters no longer believed he was fit to be Prime Minister. For a party that had positioned itself as the inevitable replacement for the Conservatives in the next general election, this was an existential crisis. Labour could not afford to go into an election with a leader who had lost the trust of the public. The final betrayal, however, came not from Labour's politicians, donors, or strategists, but from the grassroots. The very people who had worked tirelessly to rebuild the party, who had knocked on doors, campaigned, and fought for Labour's vision, now felt abandoned and deceived. Social media became a battleground, with lifelong Labour supporters expressing their anger and disappointment. Some called for an emergency party conference to determine Starmer's fate, while others demanded that the membership be given a say in whether he remained leader. The idea of a coup within Labour was no longer speculation, it was becoming a real possibility. Starmer, for all his efforts to project strength, knew that his position was slipping further by the hour. The betrayals had left him isolated, with fewer and fewer allies willing to defend him publicly. His options were dwindling. He could attempt to fight back, to hold on despite the growing revolt within his own ranks, or he could step aside, sacrificing himself in an attempt to salvage Labour's electoral hopes. But one thing was certain: Keir Starmer was no longer in control of his own destiny. The fate of his leadership, and perhaps even the future of the Labour Party, was now in the hands of those who once stood by his side. But was this truly the end for Keir Starmer, or did he have one last desperate move left to play? As the scandal reached its boiling point, Starmer found himself at a crossroads. His political career, once a carefully calculated ascent, was now in freefall. The betrayals from within his own party had left him vulnerable, the public backlash was intensifying, and the media frenzy showed no signs of slowing down. Every headline, every breaking news alert, every political commentator had the same question on their lips: would Starmer resign, or would he fight to the bitter end? For Starmer, stepping down was not an option he was willing to entertain, at least not yet. He had spent years reshaping the Labour Party in his own image, working tirelessly to erase the divisions that had plagued it under his predecessor. He had promised stability, competency, and a return to electability. But now, with his leadership under siege, he faced an impossible dilemma. If he resigned, he would go down in history as the man who led Labour into a scandal-ridden disaster. If he fought on, he risked dragging the party into an even deeper crisis, one that could hand the Conservatives an easy victory in the next general election. Despite the mounting pressure, Starmer chose to dig in his heels. His strategy was clear: go on the offensive, deny any wrongdoing, and attempt to rally his remaining supporters before it was too late. His first move was a hastily arranged press conference where he directly addressed the swirling allegations for the first time. Standing at the podium, flanked by a handful of loyalists, Starmer delivered what was supposed to be a defiant message. These allegations are nothing more than politically motivated attacks designed to derail our mission, he declared, his tone measured but firm. I will not be distracted by smear campaigns. I have spent my entire career standing for justice, integrity, and the British people. That will not change. But the response was not what he had hoped. Journalists in the room pounced, bombarding him with relentless questions. Sir, will you resign? One demanded. Why are members of your own party calling for you to step down? Another pressed. The more he insisted on his innocence, the more it became clear his words were not convincing anyone. Behind the scenes, the situation was spiraling out of control. Starmer's advisors were in open conflict, divided over how to handle the crisis. Some urged him to step down gracefully, arguing that clinging to power would only deepen the damage. Others insisted he fight on, claiming that admitting defeat would be a fatal mistake. Then came the devastating blow. A trove of internal Labour communications had been obtained by investigative journalists, revealing damning details. Within hours, multiple MPs publicly withdrew their support. Starmer's options were running out. In a last-ditch effort, he announced an emergency party meeting. The moment of reckoning had arrived. The room fell silent as a senior MP stood up. Keir, this is bigger than you. If we continue down this path, Labour will lose the next election. The trust is gone. The damage is done. It's time to step aside. For the first time, Starmer looked genuinely shaken.